How's it going, fellow pickleball techs? You're with Rafa, the pickleball tech dude, and today I'm answering some general FAQs about a paddle that we all definitely thought was done and dusted. I'm talking, of course, about the Ronbus Ripple V2. Now, this video is going to be a short introduction, a full stats breakdown, and just some quick thoughts on essentially my first impressions and pre-break-in thoughts about these paddles. This is going to serve as more of your uncut introduction into this world of ripples. Now, some of you who might be new to the channel might be wondering why these are called V2. What happened to the originals? If you want to know that, I have a full video where I broke that down a couple of months ago when this whole saga ended at the end of January 2025. But to give a quick recap here, essentially there were 4 different versions of the original Ripple, ranging from the alpha, beta, to release and production models, and these are all kind of labels that us reviewers put on those paddles. Essentially, the main problem with those paddles was the ability to pass the PB core test administered by USA Pickleball in an attempt to limit power on paddles. So while the production models, the models originally meant to go out to the public at the end of January, passed an independent PB core test at the same lab that USA Pickleball uses, and also had initially passed USA Pickleball standards. Other reviewers, as well as myself, aka the villains in pickleball, came out and did discuss how powerful these paddles were. And as USA Pickleball and other governing bodies and in general people who test paddles tend to do, they went out and asked Ronbus to resubmit paddles for further testing. This is already part of USAP's policy, I should mention, given that it was a top 10% performer in PB Core. However, when Ronbus resubmitted several paddles, USAP tested one of these paddles, which failed the PB Core test and therefore caused that paddle to be delisted. So that pretty much takes you back to right here. Again, if you want that deep dive, go watch that video. But now we've arrived at the Ripple V2, and it comes with a shiny new statement jointly between Dong Lee, the owner of Ronbus, as well as USA Pickleball, to state that they've worked extensively, essentially, in order to make sure these paddles are following all the standards, have passed PB Core, and will remain legal. Now, if you're also an owner of the original Ripple, I'd highly recommend reading this statement in full, because there is also a small excerpt regarding how you can redeem a Ripple V2 at a reduced value if you were a Ronbus Connect X Pro or otherwise got your hands on the original Ripple paddle and have proof of purchase. All right, with all that being said, here are the essentials and the stats behind the new Ripple V2. It's going to be $280 MSRP, brought down to $260 with discount code RAFA at checkout. It's also going to be available in a unique R4 hybrid shape to the Ripple line that Ronbus is introducing. What stayed the same is that there's going to be raw carbon fiber faced, and it's still going to have the carbon fiber core that Ronbus originally intended. If we look at the full stats among all 3 of these paddles, the similarities continue a bit. We have twist weights that stray towards the lower end except for the standard shape R2, which are redeemable, I've found, through some weight modification. They also are very strong in the power and pop category, contrary to what some people have been saying. I have found these paddles to be not as powerful as the production model right out the box, but still fall similarly to where I was finding the original betas pre-break-in. Now, looking at this paddle a little bit closer, it really only looks like a couple of things have changed, but they do have a somewhat significant impact on the playability. So here is an animation of how this paddle is constructed, and I'll tell you right now, it's pretty much the same as the original. So the only way to find those real differences is to break the paddle apart. And if you did that, what you would notice, like myself and a couple of others have, is that the lattice structure that goes over the foam portion of the core appears to be a little bit thicker, a little bit more reinforced. Maybe an extra sheet or 2 of carbon fiber has been added. And I think that that's to prevent the waves that we were seeing in the original alpha and beta versions of the original V1 Ripple. Now, furthermore, what you'll notice is that the swing weights of all of these paddles have gone up compared to the original. especially when it came to the R2 shape, which was my personal favorite. The reason I liked it was because it was not only not head heavy, it was head light in terms of balance point. It is the only paddle in my database that had that sort of rating. And furthermore, it was just very quick, probably a 111 to 112 swing weight if my memory serves me correctly. Now, the R2 shape has gone all the way up to a 117 swing weight, which still isn't particularly heavy, but is significantly different from the original 112. And so I think part of that is the reinforcement of the lattice. And something that I have not quite yet confirmed is I believe the density of the foam being used has also been increased, which not only should have impacts for the swing weight, as foam density is a really big predictor of how head heavy your paddle is going to be, but it also might have implications for power level because softer, less dense foam squishes more to provide more power to the ball. That being said, as I mentioned before, some people have been discussing, going a little bit back and forth about this paddle feeling less powerful than the original. And I do fall into that camp for right now, but it's, in my mind, still at minimum a top 10% performer. And if there is a break-in period, which I do predict there will be, then it's definitely going to be very close to the top of the mark. So to end, just quickly checking in on my gameplay experience. I've had this paddle for about a week, so I'm speaking to a pre-break-in experience thus far. And what I would say is that I've talked about how the sweet spot size and the power level are sort of in league with the beta version. I would say that that extends to the gameplay. I think that the R1 and R4, you really need weight reinforcement in order for the paddle to play well right now, because it currently plays with a fairly small sweet spot on those models, and the R2 is definitely not where the original R2 was. And simultaneously, on the originals, when you broke the paddle in fully, you got a plush dwell sensation off the face. Versus these paddles, you're getting more of a poppy, quick response off the face. So while it does make the paddle nice for rolls and flicks at the kitchen, it makes it a little bit less predictable on the dinking side. And simultaneously, at the kitchen line, you're not hitting with the immense 100 percentile power of the original productions where you're able to body bag people from the baseline. So essentially, that is, in one light, a good sign, because that means that there really was a lot of reworking that went into these models to make them less powerful than the original, which is exactly what I'm sure USAP wanted. But in the end, part of the appeal of this paddle was its high level power, its large sweet spot, especially on the R2, and its high level of spin. So what you've maintained on this paddle is the high level of spin, but what you're losing out on is the large sweet spot and the immense level of power. So again, it's going to be good for everybody who advocates for the game to get slower, but for everybody who essentially wanted something similar to the original and wanted that same hype to build around it, I don't think that that's necessarily where the paddle is in its pre-break-in form. So it's very hard to compare this paddle to anything else on the market, but comparing it to its original variant, I would say it doesn't quite have that same appeal just yet. Is there going to be a break-in period? I am 99% sure of it, but we're just going to have to wait and see how that impacts particularly sweet spot size and power. So if you want to wait for that video and see what those results are, that is going to come out May 30th when this paddle is set to launch to the public. So with all of that in mind, if you made it here to the end of this quick pre-break-in, check-in, sort of uncut vibe, make sure you like, subscribe, comment down below where this paddle kind of sits in your mind, knowing some of the facts about it, and whether or not you like having this, pre-full video release check-in from me. And with all that being said, I hope you all stay happy and healthy, and of course, out on the courts. Until the next one. See you soon.